Everybody, I am out here on the range and I've been trying to make a video because I've decided I want to start keeping some sort of video diary about my experiences with archery and how my head is in terms of just the overall experience and how well I think I am or am not doing. So right now, I've been out here for probably about an hour and a half and I've been applying all of the things that I learned yesterday when I came out here. I've been adjusting my grip, I've been adjusting my anchor point, I've been trying different things to see what works best for me to make it so that I can be a bit more accurate, and I've had some successes and I've had some failures. When I got here this morning and I was firing at a target, there was a gentleman who was one of the more experienced archers who gave me some suggestions on better ways to draw my bow and to set it up. Now, his suggestion was counterintuitive to what, or excuse me, not counterintuitive, excuse me, counter to what I have heard before. Basically, it had to do with rolling my fingers across the string to set it before I draw. Now, I was told that you don't want to do that because if you do that, because it's twisted, it'll affect the way the arrow flies and blah, 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 blah. So I was always just trying to place my fingers onto the bow string and draw. The problem is that by doing that, I'm actually slightly twisting it, which causes the arrow to come off of the holder, the ledge, which bends to the left. Oops, I forgot that's what the camera is. So I was a little confused, and I told him, I said, well, I was told that that's not the way to do it. He goes, well, maybe if you're doing professional target shooting and you're about 70 yards away from your target, it'll affect you. But at this level, since you're a beginner, it's always best to just set your hand in the appropriate way until you start becoming more familiar with your bow and you can become more sensitive and you know how to hold the string. So that was helpful because it was really allowing me to continue to try to advance what I've already been doing in terms of drawing the string. So that was the first thing that sort of happened today, which was cool. And it did look like it was helping me be able to do that because I was able to keep the arrow straight on the string and fire it. So with his suggestions and my techniques that I was developing from yesterday, I came out and I started firing and I was hitting the target. And I didn't do too bad on the 10, so I moved to the 15 and I started degrading on the 15, so I went back to the 10. It's always good to stay consistent. When you know that you're doing well, just continue to do it a little bit more, make sure that you're consistent with that, and then you can move to a slightly harder and try to develop the consistency there. That's the thing. But that's not the point of this entire video. So, as the time progresses and I'm trying, my ego keeps getting in the way. I want to hit the target, I want to hit the bullseye, I want to hit where I'm aiming. And the whole practice that I'm going through right now has absolutely nothing to do with being accurate, if that makes any sense. I am not trying to hit the bullseye every time. I am trying to make sure that my technique when I fire is solid so that when I get to the point that I can aim, that'll become second nature and I'll be able to hit the target consistently rather than having it go all over the place. The basics are the most important part of this process because it's what allows you to consistently fire your bow. There are certain aspects to the process of firing the bow that are absolutely vital to maintain consistency. If you don't have consistency, you don't know when you're aiming, you don't know if the arrow will fly true or not. Those steps are as follows, which I'll share with you. Number one, stance. You need to make sure that you have a good solid base. Feet apart, shoulder length. You want to be parallel with the target. So if I was standing on mine, I'd be like this, and then if you look here, you'll see there's the target. So I want to stand parallel, my feet pointing in the same direction as the target is faced. Well, no, excuse me, but the target is put on the wall. You want to be about a shoulder length apart. Your front foot, the foot that's closest to the target, can be open slightly, which means that you can tilt it out a little instead of having it just be parallel. But that's pretty much, you want to have a nice, solid, even stance. You want to be comfortable. You want to be balanced. You want to make sure that you're not going to fall over. You don't want to be crooked. Over time, you'll develop your own stance, but when you're starting off, the basics are very, very important. That's number one. Number two, holding the bow cleanly on the left hand. You want to make sure that when you're gripping the bow, that you've got it so that the web of your hand is firmly up against the bow. You want to hold it so that when you're holding the bow, if you point with your finger is pointing the same direction as the arrow. You don't want it to be pointed inwards, you don't want to point outwards, you want to be even with the arrow. So a very good solid grip is vital in order to make sure, because if you're aiming and your hand's twisted, it's going to affect the way that the arrow flies from the bow. Number three, drawing the arrow. Now this one I thought was a little bit silly, but because of the fact that watching videos and listening to other people, it just seemed consistent they all were doing the same thing. You want to draw the arrow from your quiver by the nock, not by the shaft, not by the fletching. You definitely don't want to draw it by the fletching, because you could mess up the fletching, which would affect the way the arrow flies. You want to draw it by or near the nock. And here, I'll show you what I mean when I say that. So here's an arrow sitting in a target right here. Now this is the shaft. That's the part that goes between the arrowhead and the nock. This is the fletchings, the feathers. And this right here is the nock. Now, I would suggest grabbing the arrow or pulling it from your quiver either by the nock directly or just above it. It gives you a lot more control when you're laying the arrow on your bow. Oops. When you're laying the arrow on your bow to get ready to, knock the string and pull back to fire. But getting in the habit of doing that, making it so that that's the only way that you pull it out of the quiver is just good. You want to have consistency. Constantly doing the same thing over and over again. If you play golf, you understand the consistency is necessary for a solid swing. If you want to make sure that you hit that ball straight every time, you have to develop a swing path. You have to develop a swing style. You have to develop a swing process so that when you hit that ball, you hit it exactly the same. So you can count on that. And then you can adjust it according if you want to hook or if you want to slice, if you want to drop or whatever the hell, English, you want to put any English on the ball. Same thing. You want to make sure that all of these steps are followed consistently so that when you're firing, you're hitting exactly what you're aiming at every time. Drawing the bow back, this is a technique that will be decided by you, but you want to make sure that you do it, with a nice, smooth, even pull. You don't want to be jerky, you don't want to yank back, you want to draw back the string. You want to draw it cleanly, you don't want to draw it halfway, you don't want to extend past your draw point because you can hurt yourself or the bow. You just want to draw it to the appropriate place. And then this is the part that's really important, the anchor point. I've said this a couple times, and I may have demonstrated, but I'll do it again for you now so that you get an idea. The anchor point is where you place your hand to steady before you shoot. The anchor point is very important because if the anchor point is inconsistent, if you anchor here, then here, then here, then here, then here, then here, then here, your shots are going to go all over the place. You want to be able to draw every time and be in the same place so that when you fire, it's consistent. Now, this is the part that I had the hardest time with, only because of the fact that I had 3 or 4 different places I thought were my anchor point. When I first started, what was I doing? I was doing this. This was my anchor point, my thumb. Then, I started doing this. The anchor point was here. But I wasn't getting, I wasn't getting the return on my firing like I wanted to. So I decided I was going to do what I saw all these other archers on the videos on YouTube do. When they talk about an anchor point, you'll notice they always say about roughly the same thing. My anchor point is here. I touch my mouth, or I touch my mouth with my middle finger here. But it's always something around this area. And so I said, what the hell, I'll try it. So, I pulled back, and it felt really uncomfortable for the first, I'd say 30, 40 times, just pulling it back. But eventually, I just made sure that I focused on it, and I focused on it, and I focused on it. Finally, now when I draw, that's where I touch. The last part of this is the release, and this is the part that I have the hardest time with. Because it's uncomfortable and it doesn't feel natural, but it's supposed to be. Now with any draw, when you pull back and you release the arrow, you're supposed to complete the motion. When you draw, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do this, you're supposed to pull back until you're completely done. You want to make it a straight pull, to the mouth, back, to the mouth, back. That's hard for me to do. It's really hard because, like I said, it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like something that I would do. When I let go of the arrow, I draw back, loose. I let go. Now, you don't have to go all the way back here, just as long as you have some follow-through with it. Your arm, the easiest way that I think to think about this is, if you think of your arm like a piston, okay? When you're going back, this is not the full stroke of the piston. This is the full stroke. So as you're going, you release the string, full stroke. Going, release the string, full stroke. That's the best way that I can think of to sort of explain how it should be. Just clean line, straight back. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm in a weird state of mind. It keeps happening. I think it's just because I'm not seeing the results that I want to, so I'm starting to get disappointed, and it's that ego thing. I need to get rid of it. But I become frustrated and I get depressed. Then I wonder if I'm actually depressed or if I'm just, chemically imbalanced or what the fuck ever, and it gets into this spiral thing, which will throw my head all out of whack. Plus, part of this was the social aspect of it. Even though I'm coming out here and I'm practicing because I want to get better, I'm by myself, and I'm by myself all the time. So getting out of the house and being by myself, I am getting out of the house and I'm getting fresh air and I'm getting some exercise, but it just doesn't feel, I don't know. Maybe I just enjoy it more when I'm hanging out with Steve because we get to talk and bullshit, which is weird for someone like me. Anyway, so there you go. That was my thoughts on being out here in the woods. Let me show you the surrounding area. So you can see it's a woodsy area, and then right over there on the other side of those trees is the lane for the arrows of the other parts of the target range. And then over here, and then you got the car parking lot over there. So yeah, there you go. Some real basic tips on archery from a very beginner, very new guy. I've only been doing this for about 5 days now. But I really do hope that if you do pick up archery as something to do, that you take my suggestions. It'll really help you. Believe me when I tell you that. Because, you know, going into this and not doing that stuff and not having any sort of feedback, any sort of positive feedback, can really push you away from wanting to do this. If you're doing it and you're failing, or you're messing up, or you're missing the target, or you're doing something, you know, and it happens regularly, you're going to think, oh, I suck at this. Why am I going to bother? I don't want to fucking keep doing this. You know, you're not getting any positive feedback from the efforts that you make. So save yourself a lot of the headache. If you want to learn to do this well, start with the basics. Don't worry about what you're going to hit. Don't worry about if you're getting spreads like this. Okay, you can see this is not a tight group by any means. I've got arrows on the top, I got arrows on the bottom, I got arrows on the left and right. You know, that's not a tight group. And, you know, looking at it from the perspective of somebody who wants to do well, you look at that and think, fuck, I suck. But you have to just ignore where the arrows go. As long as they hit the target area, they don't have to hit the bullseye. As long as they hit the hay bale or wherever the hell that target is, as long as they're hitting that, that's a good thing, because otherwise you have to go running to find the arrow, because if it goes over to the side, you know, or you want to make sure you don't, like, hit the wood, otherwise you could cause the head of the arrow to get all messed up. But you just, you know, you want to be, don't worry about this. Don't worry about the target. Don't worry about where you're hitting on the target. The only thing you need to think about is working on the basics. Make sure your stance is good. Make sure your draw is good. Make sure that your arrow laying is good. And what I mean by arrow laying is laying the arrow on the bow and knocking it to the string. Because if you do it clumsily and you're messing around and you push it over and then you got to pull it back and then you got to readjust your hand and you want to got to use the other hand to make sure the arrow doesn't fall off. It's, you know, it becomes a little bit more messy than it needs to be. Simply good stance, arrow from the quiver by the knock, lay it on the bow, connect it to the string. Good grip on the bow. Make sure that you're getting it into the meaty part of your hand there. You want to make sure so that when you're holding the bow, if I was holding the bow, you want to make sure that when you point your finger, it's going to be pointing in the same exact direction as the arrow is facing. Not inwards, not outwards, not downwards. You want to make sure that it's a clean, straight hold. That's how you know you're doing it well. You're making a line to the target with your hand as well as with the arrow. Make sure you have a good grip on it. Doesn't have to be tight. You're going to be primarily holding it with these two fingers. These three are just a steady, but also give you a little bit more. But you're going to be primarily holding it with these two fingers. Then, when you draw, whatever draw that you use, if it's the 3 under, 1 over, 2 under, whatever it is that you do for your process, draw it back and remember, find that anchor point. My suggestion, only because it's after trying 4 or 5 different things, my suggestion is make this your anchor point, only because you're keeping it straight. You're keeping the arrow in line with your eye. That would be the only reason why I suggest that. Not because I think it's comfortable, not because it's easy, because like I said, after the 30 or 40 times doing this, I just felt really stupid. But after a while, just like pulling the arrow out of the quiver by the knock, that felt stupid for a while too, but now I'm just doing it regularly. Pull it back. You want to continue to do it until it becomes habit, until it's just something that you do naturally, and then you can move to the next step of, okay, now that I've got the basics down, my stance, my draw of the arrow, my laying on the bow, my knocking of the arrow, my draw of the string, my anchor point, my release. Make sure that you work on the release too. When you get all of that down and you're comfortable with it, and it's not something that you have to think about when you're doing, then you can proceed to the next step of, okay, let's see about starting to get my zoning in my target. How am I aiming with my eye? Am I doing instinctual aiming? Whatever. Okay? Just a bit of advice for you from a newbie. Hopefully it'll make your archery experience easier. I'm going to make more of these as time progresses. Hopefully I'll stay in a positive mindset so I can give you more positive tips. But the only thing I can say at the end of this is just be willing to dedicate to it. Just, you know, you're not going to do well. That's okay. You're new. Just keep working on it. You'll get better, I promise. Alright, well, this is RavenLaughs out in the middle of nowhere shooting arrows and feeling like crap. I'll talk to y'all later.